Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Neptunes. In today's episode, we're going to be exploring the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 stages of learning in the NEP 2020. Today, we're going to be looking at this very important question. Why do children have to learn the same way all through their school education? Let me begin by a small anecdote which comes from my own experience. Many years ago, one parent had come very upset that why is my child learning numbers 1 to 20 in the classroom when my child has come from another school and my child already knows 1 to 1000. So I called the teacher, and the teacher said to me that, ma'am, the problem is that when I asked the child to put some beads from one bowl to another and count just 20 beads, the child went like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So the child had only few beads and was counting at a higher number. There was no alignment between the speech and the objects. So the child had actually learned the language of mathematics, but not the concept. And that is because the child was probably not taught in concrete ways which was age appropriate. So this is what we're going to be exploring today. And we have with us, once again, Mrs. Anita Karwal, who is going to be helping us understand the stage-wise system which has been put into NEP 2020. Welcome to this episode today, Anita.
Thank you, Anju.
And could you now begin by briefly telling us in NEP 2020 and NCF, why are we learning stage-wise, moving away from age-wise? Is it similar? Is it different?
This is when anybody asks me what is my favorite aspect of the NEP or the NCF. Actually, this is my favorite reform or the favorite transformation that is going to happen. What the NEP has done and what the NCF has done based on the NEP is that it has completely refigured our educational approach by dividing the life of the child into developmental stages and aligning each stage to a particular way of learning, teaching and learning. So now it's of course very well known, but I would still like to briefly just talk about it. So there are 4 stages. The first stage of foundational stage, which is of 5 years, which is for children between the age group of 3 to 8 years. So this is the stage when children are like sponges. So they are just picking up stimuli, they are picking up interactions, they're picking up so much of knowledge, and they want to learn a lot and they want to play a lot. So this is a typical stage. The next stage is the preparatory stage, which is the stage between the years 9 to 11, and it corresponds to the grades 3 to 5. Now this is the stage where structured learning, if it is introduced at this stage, the child is definitely going to absorb it better because of the way the child is growing at this stage. Then if we look at the next stage, which is the middle stage, that corresponds to grades 6 to 8. And this is the stage where the child is now having the ability to do critical thinking, problem solving, reasoning, analytics, etc. So this is the stage where it is necessary to introduce such things into the curriculum in a big way. And then the last stage of school education is the secondary stage, which is for grades 9 to 12, ages 14 to 18. And this is when the students, know that they are preparing for higher education or for employment. And this is when the students are actually consolidating their knowledge, understanding different ways to learn, etc. So it's a very scientific way of approaching education as compared to the previous approaches.
Right. So we'll come back to that. We'll explore that scientific frameworks, where it's coming from. But first tell me, are there going to be any infrastructural changes? Does this imply that schools will have to invest in making some major changes because of the stage-wise implementation of the curriculum?
Anju, that's a very essential question you're asking me, because across the country there is this sort of understanding that 5334 entails changes in infrastructure. People are understanding that, up to grade 2, we should have a separate building. From grade 3 to 5, a separate building and infrastructure and teachers, etc. It is not that at all. these stages relate only to curriculum and pedagogy. What is going to be the curriculum which will be taught in each stage is different from each other. The pedagogy is different from each other. The way we assess is going to be different. Our learning standards are different. The content is going to be different. That is all. So it is not a matter of infrastructural changes at all.
Right. I'm glad you clarified that, because these are the misconceptions probably that, the school it will be a burden on the school to implement, which is not at all. It is just a matter of practice, actually.
Absolutely. It only simply relates to the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor changes that are happening to every child in the process of growth from the ages of 3 to 18. It just aligns itself. The teaching learning process has to align itself with that.
So there have been other, educational policies that have come earlier in India. It has been there in 1968, then again in 1986. How is the NCF 2023 and NEP 2020 different from the previous policies? What has shifted and changed?
So, so there was the 1986 policy, as you know, it encouraged the 10 plus 2 plus 3 system. And that is the system we are very used to. You and I have come from that system. That system was not aligned to developmental stages of the child. It was more aligned to how to kickstart a child's journey to higher education or to employment.
Right.
Rather than to the developmental stage that the child is in. So, compared to that, this is a completely different approach. And it is for the first time that NEP has removed silos. If you look at foundational stage, for example, there used to be a silo between preschool and school. Now, NEP is saying that between the ages of 3 to 8 years, every child requires similar kind of curriculum and pedagogical structures because their developmental stage is such during this entire phase. If you recall, in the 10 plus 2 system, there will be a 10th board exam and there will be a 12th board exam, which continues even now. However, the whole stage from 9th to 12th is considered one stage. It requires a similar approach to teaching and learning because of the stage in which the child is.
Right.
So this is a very, very specific approach which is being introduced for the first time in the country.
That's really very interesting. I do remember that, all through our schooling years, we actually all learned pretty much in the same way. I think for a long time, and this is true in many countries, that in pre-primary, children are learning largely through play and other activities. But the moment they come into grade 1, the pedagogy shifts to just sitting on, in benches and then copying from the blackboard, and it will be more of rote learning. And that kind of pedagogy continued all the way up to grade 12. So it was never aligned to the child's needs, actually. And that means in NEP now, what we're looking at is a stage of development of the child, and the pedagogy has to be aligned to that stage and not only a particular age or a grade or a class.
So if I remember correctly, Anju, from my own schooling, I think I learned rote learning somewhere in the foundational stage itself. Because there was no connect between me and the teacher. The teacher did not understand my stage of development. And along the way, all through school, I have been a rote learner myself. It was a long time later, in fact, probably after joining service, that I realized the value of critical thinking and problem solving, etc., which I had never learned in my schooling or in my college education. But here is a new approach to this whole thing. What can be taught and in which manner it can be taught or learnt by the child, in which stage, has become more relevant than typical routine pedagogy trying to finish syllabi and textbooks and chapters.
I really hope that the viewers and especially the practitioners, teachers are listening to this, that it is no longer important to really learn by rote a particular chapter in a textbook and to pass, unit tests, to have mugged up that content and to get the marks, because that has no meaning. What is the true understanding of the child? And that also, those assessments have to be done, both the curriculum and the assessment are done according to a particular stage, which may be the end of foundational stage or it may be through the preparatory, but it is a larger vision of the development. I think here we can also speak about the fact that the NEP has drawn on a lot of scientific
Yes, Anju,
frameworks.
it has. And I know that you have a study on all these various frameworks and you've done your PhD also in experiential learning. So maybe you can tell our listeners, about some of the important approaches which are actually aligned with what NEP is saying.
Well, I think the first thing that came to my mind when NEP was released was that it seems to already draw on the cognitive developmental stages as defined by Jean Piaget, because Piaget has been it has been a seminal work done by him. Debates aside, it still remains a landmark study on the fact that there are stages of cognitive development in children as they grow older. The second one is, I think, would be Vygotsky also, who actually spoke about the cultural context. So the social aspect of children learning, which means that children learn by interaction with the environment, they learn through interaction with each other, etc. So this aspect of the social, context is very important, and that was, of course, Vygotsky. There are a lot of other frameworks that come to mind. One is, of course, Erik Erikson and his psychosocial stages of development. We can call it that, stages of identity, etc. So we can see that the NEP kind of is also aligned with that, because, processes of identity development, critical thinking, etc. This all follows that. But I think largely these are, of course, all very recent Western systems, whether in psychology or social sciences, etc. But even in the ancient Indian texts, we can say that there was uh, already mention of that, because we do have a text saying that children would be going to school at the age of 7. So that means till the age of 7, it was believed that the child has to be at home with the mother or the parents, and the child was learning from the context at home. But at the age of 7, the child is now developmentally ready to move on to the next phase, which is going to a more formal structure of learning, which would have been the Gurukul system, etc. So many of the, this is of course thousands of years back that the Indian texts were already mentioning it. But also a lot of other Indian educators, if you look at even Gijubhai Badeta, he's also spoken about this.
He's spoken about it. In fact, he himself experimented with it. I think he's one of India's greatest educators.
And very lesser known, sadly, because all his experiments in schooling, his book, there was Sapna, etc. He talks about the practical way of teaching and learning in the classroom.
In fact, I would recommend all our listeners to read his book, Diva Swapna, Gijubhai Badeka's. It has a translation in English. It is available in Hindi and Gujarati also.
Now, let's look at how do these stages function. Can we look at, for example, in practical terms, what's the foundational stage? What does that really mean?
If we look at the foundational stage, let us look at what development is happening here. So this is the stage when gross motor skills are getting refined. They are not exactly refined, but slowly they're getting refined. Emotions are beginning to get regulated. They are not regulated completely, but beginning to get regulated. And children slowly start showing peer interactions. They want to have friends. They want to get together in groups. And this is the stage when children also cognitively do better at languages and pre-math skills. So learning a language and learning the basic numeracy skills. This is the stage when, in the foundational stage, children do very well. So when we align this together, so what is the pedagogy that is required here? It is play-based. Because children have to regulate their emotions. They love to play all the time. They love peer interaction. They want to be in groups. They want to be with friends rather than with adults. So play-based pedagogy has been recommended.
Yes.
And it has been recommended that this is the stage you tap for ensuring basic literacy and basic numeracy skills.
Right. If we follow the developmental stages, cognitive development, and so you're talking about that, it's also through the different senses, multisensorial learning, exploratory ways of learning are very important.
Yes.
So, if children are learning by making things, by, let's say, drawing things, so, a child who's drawing a shape, even if it's a letter S or anything, will find it like a snake and would use Play-Doh or ropes or pebbles or whatever. But children, this is what Piaget also talks about, concrete pre-operational stages are, in concrete ways. We have children go from concrete to abstract.
Yeah.
So at this stage, play-based and concrete forms of learning, not abstract. Children are not ready for abstract thinking. I mean, they may be at some of them, at some, but largely they would love to touch, smell, feel, uh, draw, paint. All these things are really important at this stage.
And at this stage, the child's socio-emotional skills, the child's language skills, the child's aesthetic and cultural development, for everything we are building a foundation. And this is the stage when the child is so active mentally and physically and psychomotor wise that if we do not tap into this stage, we have actually lost out on a huge chunk of learning. So it's very important that in this stage we lay down the foundation for everything, whether it is for cognitive abilities, whether it is for emotional regulation, which means the social emotional aspects, or it is for psychomotor abilities, getting them into sports and games, etc., or values or aesthetics, everything. This is the foundation.
You know what is really important for children at this age is also that we forget that they're really very strong self-learners.
Yes.
Children have a tremendous capacity to learn. I mean, that's human
at every stage.
Yeah,
At
but
every
already at this stage.
Yeah.
So when teachers go into the classroom or even parents think, oh, I'm going to teach you this, partially you've already killed it. Because you're coming with your own mindset about what to teach and how to teach it. But the child is actually learning. They already know how to learn. They're already exploring. So I think one of the roles of the teacher should be to just allow children, create the opportunities for children to explore, discover, experiment, and children learn through their experience.
Yes.
So, the feedback should come from the child's own experimentation rather than feedback being given by an adult, because they're able to draw conclusions. And the role of the teacher would be that of a guide or a mentor, where the teacher can just say, all right, what did you think about this? So what did you learn? So even from that age onwards, you should be moving in that direction.
Focus has to shift from teaching to learning. So here, what we are doing mostly at this present moment in the education system across the world is that we are teaching.
Yes.
Whether the child is learning or not, there is no focus there.
It's a one-way thing. And teaching is such a didactic activity.
Yes.
I used to always joke with people, and I know it's a nasty thing to say at times, but I used to say, if you want to kill something, just make it a subject and put it in the classroom and put an exam at the end. And there, it's gone forever.
Yeah.
But the joy of learning is something else. And we need to come back to that.
Yes.
So, okay, now let's move on to the preparatory stage. So what would that be like?
So like I said, preparatory stage is for 8 to 11-year-olds for grades 3 to 5. Now, in this stage, children have already picked up on the language. They have already picked up a bit of numeracy skills. And this is the time when they begin to think a little logically, and they are able to grasp a few abstract concepts. In fact, they're able to bring themselves logically to grasp abstract concepts. Their friendships develop. They start to become a little more independent in what they have to do to lead their life. They're already independent by this stage, but they become independent also in their thought process, in their opinions, in their expressions, etc. And their motor skills improve much more by this stage. So this is the stage when the teaching and the learning process that has to be tapped is by giving them more of experiential formats of learning, more of activity-based, inquiry-based, discovery-based. That is the kind of teaching and learning that should happen at this stage.
Yes. To take a practical example for teachers is that for fractions is very hard to understand if it is done in an abstract way on the blackboard, etc. But if you use origami, for example, or paper folding activities, which is a very simple resource to use, then children will be able to learn in much more concrete ways. And from that concrete, then they can go to some more abstract extrapolations of that, or symbolic representation of the concrete things that they've learned. So this is a stage where children can begin to move from concrete, and then through the symbolic representation of things, they can start understanding the abstract concepts also.
Yeah. Especially because what happens is at this stage, we realize that the stage is such that a child will be able to handle more than 2 subjects. So in the foundational stage, we saw there are only 2 things we teach the child: basic numeracy, basic literacy. This is the stage because the child has now come to a certain level of development. We introduce 6 subjects. So there are 2 language subjects, there is 1 mathematics, there is 1 art education, there is a physical education, and there is a very interesting subject which NCF has introduced. It's called the world around us, which relates not just to the environment but everything in the world around us. So our community, our social life, our geography, everything is introduced in grade 3 itself. So this is based on the fact that we have faith in this child's ability to take the concrete and go towards the abstract, the concrete as a foundation, and now the child is able to go towards the abstract.
Right. I think also I would, perhaps, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we say that there are 6 subject areas which are being introduced here, we are also doing a lot of transdisciplinary and learning, right?
Yes.
So it's not like children are learning subjects in silos. The knowledge body is there, but the children could be learning through one large activity or like a field trip or some exploratory play. And through that play activity, they could be learning several things.
Yeah. So that is why I mentioned that experiential learning becomes a very important part of the learning at this stage. And another pedagogy which has to be widely used at this stage is peer and collaborative learning, group learning, because this is the stage where friendships are becoming very strong and they learn very well when they are in that
From
group,
each other.
from each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's also the stage where the children actually, when they play games, for example, they learn the concept of rules. Otherwise, children are by nature quite egocentric. So for them to become anchored in the idea that, okay, there are rules, you got to follow the rules, this helps them even for the civic sense later by just playing certain sports or board games or whatever. So I think
Yeah.
this is also an important part of their
Yeah, it
development.
teaches them discipline, it teaches them the whole fact of, accommodating others, diversity and inclusion, etc.
Yes. So all of this is part of
this stage.
and it is part of the NCF 2023, which
Yes.
encourages us to do that.
Yeah.
Right. What would be the middle stage then like? How do we progress from this to the next stage?
Okay. So now, as the child is growing up, in the middle stage, the child is in the age group of 12 to 14 and will be covering grades 6 to 8. Now, language has developed much better. So, children from this age onwards, you have seen they start debating and they start going for, theater and stuff like that, performances. Their logical reasoning is better. Their critical thinking and problem solving skills has developed far better than it was at the previous stages. And peer relationships are very important. And they have a very defined sense of self identity by the middle grade. So, this is the stage where the curriculum now introduces more subjects. So, the curriculum introduces 9 subjects in the middle stage. 9 subjects includes 3 languages. And as I spoke the last time, the 3 languages, 2 are native and 1 could be English. Languages are the choice of the state government. So, there will be 3 languages, there will be mathematics, there will be art education, physical education, there will be sciences, social sciences, and vocational education. And this is the stage where a lot of interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary work will be done because the child is capable of doing logical thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, everything the child is capable of doing. So, therefore, this stage introduces a huge amount of multidisciplinary approach, and the pedagogy remains experiential, but project based learning is also introduced at this stage.
I think this is an important point because otherwise it is perceived that there's a lot of burden. I have to do so many subjects and, through experiential learning, teachers are confused. So I think to take a concrete example, let us say the children are mapping the idea of pollution, around them. Like what is the level of pollution or what is the purity of the water around them, etc. If they look at that, take any one activity, then they will be learning several things through that particular activity or action. So it could be a simple experiment, it could be a field trip, it could be exploration of their neighborhood or even their school or even their class, for example. And when they take that small thing up, it could be, let's say, doing a wastage audit, like how much of wastage is there of water or paper or electricity in our school or waste management, for example. So if they look at that, then they begin to identify a problem and begin to reflect about it. And in that activity, then several different disciplines can be covered.
Yes, and this requires a bit of hard work from the teacher's side, because they will have to map these things beforehand. Also, since you mentioned this, I want to mention that we have this proclivity to give a lot of homework which really has no meaning. Instead of giving homework which has no meaning, which is only a repetition of what happened in class or simply leads to some rote learning, why not give this kind of a homework? When the child is learning about pollution, let the child go and collect samples from the neighborhood, etc., and get a fluoroscope and test what is happening, and maybe look for some solutions and come out with some solutions.
Just
in class.
observations.
Just observation.
Just noting down in their notebooks,
Yes.
doing a little survey.
Yeah.
I think children love doing the surveys.
Yes.
So if you want to give any kind of homework which would encourage critical thinking, communication skills, life skills, interaction with the environment, then just tell them to do a little survey to see how many leaking taps are there in their home or in their neighborhood, for example.
Absolutely.
Or how many languages do different people speak, or some such thing. What are the age groups? How many?
Yeah.
So what do people like to eat?
I want to mention about a school I saw abroad, and where sixth graders were being taught language by a survey they did of hoardings. So, what is written on the hoardings? So, you study 3 or 4 hoardings in groups and then talk about the language, discuss it, break it up. What an interesting way of learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things we do in our school, which, for free texts or just reading, we would tell children to bring any written text, whether it's bills, articles, magazine covers. They've not learned how to read yet. They would bring that into the classroom, and then they would begin to identify, because children can identify from fonts and sizes what kind of a language is it, what kind of a text is it. Is it a publicity text? Is it a formal text? Is it a government letter? Things like that. And as we come into higher classes, for example, this particular stage, in a middle stage, then they would begin to analyze. For example, if you've got a newspaper and a magazine article, what is the format? What's the layout? So, by allowing children to bring things from their environment into the classroom, rather than the onus, till now in traditional education, the onus has been on the teacher. The teacher has to get something into the classroom. Instead of doing that, just say, all right, tomorrow or today itself in the school, if the situation permits, children can bring one something, any written form of text, bring it in the classroom. It could be objects, it could be anything. So in that sense, then the children are able to analyze, because there's ownership. The child has got it. So then the child is engaged rather than the teacher getting it.
Absolutely. And it is not going to be easy, Anju, but it is the only way forward. If we want things to change from teaching to become a learning process, this is the only way forward. We have to keep the child at the center and transform our teaching and learning processes accordingly.
Also, the connection between the inner world and the outer world of the child. Yes. The relationship to one's environment, context, objects, people is the most fundamental part of building, a human life. Because once I begin to relate to the outside world, relate to the objects, the culture of objects or people, then I'm beginning to understand, I'm beginning to anchor myself in reality or in my own context. That has not been happening through the textbook-based rote learning.
No, it is not happening.
Yes.
So, what is there inside the child remains inside, and what the child is learning from outside, from the external environment, stays there. There is no connect between the two. In fact, there is a Hindi song, an old movie, which says, "Andar se kuch bahar na aa sake, bahar se kuch andar na ja sake." That's exactly what is happening. There is just no connect between the two.
It's the Great Wall.
It's a great wall,
which needs to be brought down. Yes. So let's now probably think about the next stage, which is a secondary stage, which is a final stage between grades 9 to 12.
Yes.
What is this stage all about?
So here, if you look at the development of a child, the child is actually experiencing major shifts and major advancements in the child's, the way of thinking. From concrete to complete abstract thinking is possible. The child can or has become a critical thinker, a problem solver. Communication skills are absolutely wonderful by now and almost reached the adult kind of communication skills. And they have a very strong sense of personal identity by this stage. And the peer relationships have now become meaningful. You have the concept of BFF and stuff like that. So now it has become very meaningful, where you learn from each other and you take care of each other, and look after each other's emotions, etc. Now, at this stage, the curriculum is expected to offer much greater depth uh, as compared to earlier. So, because now the curriculum has to include a lot of critical thinking, attention to life aspirations as well, and flexibility in subject choices, so that the child is now able to look forward to what the child has to do in either higher education or employment. So, this is the stage when we cement all this. So, in this stage, the pedagogy is mostly a multidisciplinary approach pedagogy, which has a lot of project based learning. Experiential learning continues, it continues all through. There will be case studies approach, there will be a lot of research which the child is expected to do and come out with their own solutions for a lot of problems. Uh, we can have phenomena based learning, we can have any kind of learning which is based on application of learning to real life. So this is what the stage is about.
Yes, I think I remember that, there are schools now that have started doing this in the country after the NEP 2020 also, where they are looking at problems and they're looking at how can they find a solution to that. Now, it's true that every time we can't find a solution, but the fact that you've located a problem is probably one of the biggest um, empowerments that we can give, offer to our students. Because, and this is something that this American psychologist and educator also talks about, Jerome Bruner. Jerome Bruner, who talks about the importance of simply identifying a problem, not just problem solving. If you've already identified, you're already on your way to the solution. So the fact that children can look at something and saying, all right, there is rainwater which is coming into our school and we're not doing anything with this rainwater. How can we now make a rainwater harvesting model or a system here? How can we collect that, or stop the wastage of electricity, or look at some solar powered device that can power some of the electricity in our school? So when children begin to do that, then they're looking at across subject domains like environmental sciences or physics and chemistry and other sciences. So that is how I think children can learn, and they're also becoming ready for a lot of not just cognitive aspects, but also this life skills that are brought in.
Yes, they are actually getting ready for life at the secondary stage. So every possible skill, whether it is life skill or learning skill or literacy skills, this is the epitome at which they want to acquire the maximum number of skills. In the present system of education before NEP, not the present but pre-NEP system of education, none of this was focused on. And the system was of simply putting children into streams, giving them no choices, um, no participation or student agency in their own learning. And therefore, what the student ended up doing was picking up some stream wherever the parents pushed the child into, and then coming out completely befuddled and confused as to what to do with life. So NEP now offers that in the secondary stage, there has to be so much choice. The child is offered 4 baskets in the 11th and 12th standard of subjects from which the child can choose subjects. So they can choose from each basket, or they can choose from just 2 baskets, minimum 2 baskets they have to choose from. So the child is getting this kind of combinations which they had never dreamt of. So it is possible for a child to learn chemistry along with psychology, or let us say physics along with fashion studies. It's possible to do
That's
that.
just so amazing and so fantastic. But you mentioned that's from 11th and 12th.
Yes.
So I remember I met a gentleman recently from Pune, and he was really very upset. He said that my child is in 8th grade and he's going to a very good school, and the school is forcing the child to pick up a stream by the end of 8th grade. So that from 9th onwards, the child is in a particular stream. And he told me exactly, he says, ma'am, I'm very frustrated because my child doesn't know really what he wants to do. And I told him that that's not required at all by the government. This is not a government guideline. This is a school which is doing it. And he was very worried because he said, I can't tell this to the school because then my child might get affected by some sort of a bias or something. So I thought this is important in this podcast to clarify to parents and teachers.
Yes, this is not government policy. And with the beginning of implementation of NEP and the NCF, it is now established that this is not government policy at all. And therefore, the child must get these choices. Of course, I understand that there will be challenges in every school, to bring in this policy. So the NCF has very practically given that kind of scope. So it says that, in the initial 5 years, if you're not able to bring in all subjects, this is what you can do. So this is laid down in NCF, where you can do a smaller version of the choices. And after 5 years, in a phased manner, you can slowly increase the choices. So it is not as if it's a very impractical document, tomorrow you have to change everything and bring in 20 more teachers. It's not like that.
Right. It's just the fact that you can give some choice to the child.
Yeah.
And also, I love the idea that, stream is not a rigid silo without any connections with other subject domains. Like a child who's choosing science can also choose philosophy. The idea, because both are important. By just cutting off the child from one way of learning, we've again created those silos in minds, and we've deprived children of diverse interests, because children may have an interest in both things equally, in art as well as science. So why can't this child do both?
Absolutely true. In fact, NEP and NCF have relegated the word stream and completely removed it from the dictionary of school education. It can go back to streams and rivers and oceans. It need not be there in education.
So what is it? Is there any word that has replaced it?
There is no replacement. It is called flexibility and choice.
Wow.
For students. There is no stream. There is no question of streams now.
And I think I would really like to share here that a lot of research evidence shows that when children have a choice in anything, whether it is classroom, textual choices or bringing something in, what games do you want to play, what subjects do you want to choose, the learner engagement is much higher because there is a greater ownership. The children are agents in their learning process. There is empowerment. They have a voice in something. So by giving this flexibility to children, we are actually making them part of the process of their own journey of education.
This is human psychology, and somehow we believe that human psychology is not applicable to children. It is only applicable to adults. So whatever is applicable to adults is also applicable to children.
Absolutely. So I think now with that, it's just very transformative. Before we come to the end of this episode, I wanted to share one thing. I remember I went through CBSE school education, and I drew those lovely electrical circuits, got marks, wrote, learned, but I never knew how to change the fuse in my house.
I don't know till today.
I probably don't know now. I may confess, I just know how to put the switch up. But that's the thing.
Yeah.
Where is the applicability of whatever I've learned to my real life? And that's what we are hoping, that with the NEP and the NCF, we make the possibility, we open the doors for children to be able to apply that learning and get empowered for their life.
And therefore, that teaching learning process has to be so contextualized to the present and the future. I want to give you one example here. If we are teaching the child, for example, today, how to write a letter to a friend who is staying in the next village, is it relevant really? Because now with the mobile and the WhatsApp communication, etc.
True.
So what we need to do is to contextualize everything. Instead of teaching just how to write a letter, perhaps we do teach that so that everybody should know how to write a letter. But we should be also teaching how to communicate with the present technology which is available. What would you do? What kind of communication you should not do, and what kind of communication you should do.
Yeah. And I think cutting marks of a child who has made some spelling errors may not be that useful today, because when we are all writing on laptops or even on phones, there's a spell check, there's an autocorrect. So if I don't know the spelling, I can go online or it will be autocorrected. So we should not take any punitive action, because cutting marks is really punitive, I feel. So these are the kind of things I think we would have to change in our approaches.
Yes.
Teachers would have to change. What are we really focusing on? Is it relevant today? And I think that is something we'll be covering in one of the episodes on skills and what are the skills which are useful and not useful. But coming back to towards the ending of our episode, let's look at some practical tips for teachers and educators. Let's say that we would hope that teachers can make some small changes in their pedagogy, because the NEP and NCF is really about the pedagogical changes for the stages. So let's see if it's a preparatory stage, we can say can make one small change, and by bringing in the possibility of children getting their toys or favorite storybook or something and coming and doing some sort of a show and tell, talking about it in the class, what do they do, why do they like this particular toy or book, etc. That could be the kind of activity in preparatory
Developing
stage.
their communication abilities.
Right.
Yes.
And in preparatory stage, according to the stage, the development, it could be playing a game. So if children are playing a game together, it's bringing collaborative skills, they're learning the rules of the game, they're understanding each other, and they might then, after having played the game in groups, so they could be, the class can be divided into groups of 4 or 5, etc. And the children play a favorite game together, they decide which game they want to play, and then they can share what they liked about the game and share it in front of the class.
So this would be the preparatory stage, and the previous example that you gave would be foundational stage.
Yeah. In the middle stage, of course, it could be also about an art activity or a sport activity that they could do individually or in pairs. And then they could reflect about, because self-reflection is again very important. So they could give a peer-to-peer feedback, or they could do self-reflection and share their reflections with each other and in front of the class. That could be the kind of developmental activities, which goes with the pedagogy. And probably, I think in the secondary stage, because we're talking about critical thinking, logical reasoning, etc., children could be then introduced to problem-solving strategies. And at this point in time, as teachers, you could simply ask children to make a list of things that they think is a problem or something issue to be resolved through observation in their school campus, or it could be in their neighborhood. So just coming out with that list, sharing with a peer, and then maybe making a final list in the classroom together. Just that much would be bringing the children, into critical thinking, observation, communication, identification of social or other problems, etc. So this is just an example of what do we mean really by stage-wise pedagogies which are adapted to the ages and the stages.
Yeah.
So yes, if you do that, and we hope you do, then do share with us on our social media platforms. And I hope that this episode was very, very useful to you. Thank you very much, Anita, for all your inputs in demystifying the stage and age with us. And let's remember that the educational journey is a journey which is a continuum. And if we want the transformation to happen, then we must follow the stages of human development. And that is what the NEP and NCF have done for us. Thank you very much, viewers, and look forward to having you join us the next time.
Thank you.